Hello there everybody, Martin here from Affinity for Commander. Today we have another great gameplay video for you to enjoy, so without further ado, let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Anowon the Ruin Thief Rogue Tribal deck, and keep an opening hand containing Changeling Outcast, Black Bloom Rogue, Varrogoth Bloodsky Sire, Bident of Thassa, 2 islands and a swamp.
I am playing my Teysa Karlov Aristocrats deck, and keep a starting hand of Enlightened Tutor, Swords to Plowshares, Cruel Celebrant, also Signet, Day of Judgment, Isolated Chapel, and a Plains.
Terence is playing his Katilda Dawnheart Prime Human Tribal deck, keeping a hand consisting of Champion of the Parish, Archangel of Thune, Command Tower, Fortified Village, a Plains, a Forest, and a Snow-Covered Plains.
And finally, Paddy is playing his Pramikon Sky Rampart Pillar Fort deck, and keeps a hand made up of Humble Defector, Master Warcraft, Warmonger Hellkite, Spectator Seating, Sunhome Fortress of the Legion, Tectonic Edge, and a Plains.
Alex wins the die roll and plays a Plains before passing to Terence.
Terence plays Fortified Village, revealing a forest tablet enter untapped. It then taps the land to cast Champion of the Parish, and passes.
I play a Swamp, cast Changeling Outcast, and end my turn.
Paddy plays Spectator Seating, and passes to me.
Alex plays Isolated Chapel and taps out to cast Orzhov Signet. Out of mana, he passes the turn.
Terence plays a Plains and casts his commander, Katilda Dawnheart Prime. He puts a +1/+1 counter on his champion with their own ability, and then moves to combat, where he attacks Paddy with the aforementioned creature. Unable to block, Paddy takes 2 damage, and Terence ends his turn.
I begin my turn by playing an island and move to combat. Here I also attack Paddy, dealing him 1 damage, and move to my second main phase. Here I cast Looter Ilkor and pass to Paddy.
Paddy plays an island and casts Azorius Signet. With nothing more to do, he passes.
Alex misses his land drop, casts Cruel Celebrant, and ends his turn.
Terence starts his turn by playing a forest, and then casts Drannith Magistrate.
I guess nobody else will be casting their commanders anytime soon.
He puts a second +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Parish, and moves to combat, where he attacks Martin with a 3/3 soldier. Martin takes the 3 damage, and Terence passes to Martin.
In my turn I play an island and move to combat. Here I attack Terence with both of my creatures, neither of which he can block. He takes 2 damage in this way, and I draw and discard a card of my Looter's ability. With 3 mana open, I pass the turn.
Paddy plays Sunhome Fortress of the Legion, and casts Humble Defector. Finally possessing a creature, he ends his turn.
Alex casts Sol Ring, closely followed by Solemn Simulacrum. I respond to this by flashing in Opposition Agent, causing Alex to get very salty with me.
I hate you so much right now.
I search Alex's library for a swamp, exile the land for later use, and a very unhappy Alex passes to Terence.
Terence plays Command Tower and casts Archangel of Thune.
Hey, that's not a human.
Moving to combat, Terence attacks Paddy with his champion, and Paddy declares no blocks. He takes 3 damage, and Terence passes the turn.
I play Alex's swamp that I exiled with Opposition Agent, and cast Hero's Downfall, targeting Archangel of Thune. The angel is destroyed, and I move to combat where I attack Terence with my 2/1/1s. Terence takes 2, I draw and discard a card of Looter Ilkor, and pass the turn.
Paddy begins his turn by activating his Defector's ability, drawing 2 cards. He passes control of the creature to me, and then plays Temple of Enlightenment. Paddy scries, keeping the top card of his library where it is, and casts Thief of Dreams. He targets Martin with the spell, drawing 2 cards, discards down to 7, and ends his turn.
Alex wastes no time activating Humble Defector's ability, drawing 2 cards, and returning the creature to its rightful owner. Next he plays a Plains and taps out to cast Athreos Shroud Veiled. Alex then moves to his end step where he puts a coin counter on his sad robot and passes to Terence.
Terence plays a snow-covered plains and casts Shamanic Revelations. He draws 3 cards in this way and passes the turn.
I play an island and cast Sword of the Animist. Next I attach the sword to my Changeling, move to combat, and attack Alex with my Outcast and my Looter, and Paddy with my Agent. My sword triggers, allowing me to put a swamp into play from my library, and damage then occurs. Both Alex and Paddy take 3, and I draw and discard thanks to my Cause ability. With nothing more to do, I end my turn.
Paddy taps Humble Defector, drawing 2 cards, and passing the traitor back to me.
There's some clear favouritism going on over there.
Next he plays Myriad Landscape as his land for turn, casts Boros Signet, and then casts Brainstorm. Paddy draws 3 cards, puts 2 cards to his hand on top of his library, and moves to his end step. Here he discards down to 7 and passes to me.
Alex starts his turn by casting Day of Judgment, and with the spell on the stack activates Humble Defector's ability. He draws 2 cards, returns the rogue to Paddy, and the board wipe then resolves. Every creature in play is destroyed, and Alex drains the rest of the table for 2 with his Celebrant's effect. He draws a card with his Sad Robot's death trigger, and the aforementioned golem is returned to play thanks to the coin counter that Athreos placed on it. Alex puts a swamp into play tapped from his library with Solemn Simulacrum's ETB, plays a plains, and casts Blood Artist. With nothing more to do, he moves to his end step, putting a coin counter on his Simulacrum before passing the turn.
Terence starts his turn by playing Reliquary Tower and casts Torrens, Fist of the Angels. Next he taps out to cast Champion of Lamholt, triggering Torrens' ability. Terence creates a 1/1 human soldier with training and ends his turn.
In my turn I play a swamp and tap all of my mana to cast Sepulchral Primordial. I use the creature's ETB to return Alex's Cruel Celebrant, Paddy's Humble Defector, and Terence's Archangel of Thune to the battlefield under my control, and pass to Paddy.
Paddy plays Temple of Epiphany, scrying the top card of his library to the bottom, and then casts his commander, Pramikon, Sky Rampart. He chooses for everybody to be only able to attack in an anti-clockwise direction, and passes the turn.
Alex plays Westvale Abbey as his land for turn, and casts his commander, Teysa Karlov. Moving to his end step, Alex puts a coin counter on his commander, and ends his turn.
Terence casts a very shiny Realm Walker, naming Human with the Shapeshifter's ability. This triggers both Torrens and Champion of Lamholt's abilities, putting a +1/+1 counter on the champion, creating a human soldier, and putting a second +1/+1 counter on the champion when the token enters the battlefield.
Synergy!
Next, Terence recasts his commander, creating another token, and putting 2 more +1/+1 counters on his champion. Out of mana, he passes to Martin.
I begin my turn by playing Witch's Cottage, which enters untapped given that I already control 4 swamps. I use the cottage's ETB to put the opposition agent in my graveyard on top of my library, and then activate Humble Defector's ability. I donate the red rogue to Terence, given that he is the only player yet to control it, and draw 2 cards before moving to combat. Here I attack Terence with Archangel of Thune, dealing him 3 damage, and gaining 3 life from the Angel's lifelink. This triggers the creature's ability, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature I control, and I move to my post-combat main phase. Here I cast Varagoth, Blood Sky Sire, and realise that I probably should have done this before combat so that he would have gotten a +1/+1 counter.
You live and you learn, I guess.
Not yet finished, I cast Rootwater Thief, which has received an errata to make it a rogue, and pass. Paddy responds to this by sacrificing his Myriad Landscape, and I elect not to flash in Opposition Agent in case this is a trick to get her onto the battlefield. Paddy searches his library for 2 mountains, puts them into play tapped, and proceeds to his turn.
In his turn, Paddy casts Basandra Battle Seraph, and then casts Silent Arbiter. With nothing more to do, he ends his turn, and I respond to this by casting Enlightened Tutor. Not liking the sound of this, Marta responds to my response by flashing in Opposition Agent, and once she resolves, I cast Mortify, destroying her. Cruel Celebrant triggers, gaining Martin a life and having the rest of us lose a life, and I search my library for Ashnod's Altar, putting the artifact on top of my library. With no further interruptions, I move to my turn.
Alex casts the Ashnod's altar that he just tutored for, followed by Pitiless Plunderer. Next he sacrifices Solemn Simulacrum to the altar, gaining 2 colourless mana, creating 2 treasure tokens, drawing 2 cards, and returning the golem to play thanks to the coin counter that was on it.
Gotta love Teysa's trigger doubling ability.
Alex drains Terrence for 2 with Blood Artist, and puts a swamp onto the battlefield from his library with the Sad Robot's ETB. With the land tutoring ability on the stack, Paddy takes the opportunity to activate his Seraph's ability, forcing Blood Artist to attack this turn. Not yet finished, Alex plays Bajuka Bog, exiling my graveyard as he does so. He then once again sacrifices his Simulacrum to Ashnod's altar, generating 2 more colourless mana, creating 2 more treasures, drawing 2 more cards, and draining me for 2 with his vampire.
So much value.
Still not finished, Alex sacrifices Blood Artist to the altar, creating 2 colourless mana and 2 treasures, and draining Paddy for 2 to keep things balanced. He then uses 4 of his floating mana and 1 treasure to cast Revelark, immediately sacrificing the elemental to his altar. He creates 2 treasures, but more importantly returns Solemn Simulacrum and Blood Artist to the battlefield of Revelark's death trigger. Alex searches his library for a swamp, puts the land into play tapped, and uses 1 treasure and 2 of his floating mana to cast Ministrat of Obligation. Fortunately for the rest of us, Alex failed to draw anything that would make his sacrifice engine go infinite, and instead he moves to his end step. He puts a coin counter on Teysa and passes to Terrence.
Terrence starts his turn by activating Humble Defector's ability, gifting the creature to Martin and drawing 2 cards. Next he casts Cemetery Protector, exiling the Revelark in my graveyard with their ETB, creating a human soldier, and putting 2+1/+1 counters on Champion of Lambhold.
Well, that's one potential problem dealt with.
Next Terrence casts Augur of Autumn, creating another human soldier, as well as a 1/1 human token thanks to Cemetery Protector. This puts 3 more +1/+1 counters on the champion, and Terrence then moves to combat. Here he attacks me with his 10/10 warrior, and unable to block her, I take the 10 damage. Happy with what he's managed to achieve in this turn, Terrence passes.
I play Command Tower and once again activate Humble Defector's ability. I pass the creature back over to Terrence, draw 2 cards, and finally cast my commander, Anowon the Ruin Thief. Next I equip my Sword of the Animist to Varagoth and move to combat, where I attack Terrence with my aforementioned demon. I put a swamp into play from my library with my sword's trigger, and pay 2 mana to search my library for a card with Varagoth's ability. I put a Victim of Night on top of my library in this way, and damage then occurs with Terrence taking 3. He then mills 3 thanks to Anowon, with all 3 being land, and I end my turn.
Paddy plays a Plains and casts Warmonger Hellkite. Moving to combat, he attacks Martin with his Silent Arbiter, and Martin blocks the construct with his Primordial, killing it.
Suspicious.
Blood Artist triggers, I drain Martin for 2 in this way, and Paddy passes to me.
Alex starts his turn by playing Temple of the False God and sacrifices Ministrant of Obligation to Ashnod's altar. He produces 2 colourless mana, gains 2 life, has me lose 2 life, and forgetting about Teysa's ability, creates 2 1/1 spirits with flying instead of 4.
My dad.
Next he sacrifices 5 treasures and 5 creatures to Westvale Abbey, draining me for 10 more life with Blood Artist triggers. Alex draws 2 cards from Solemn Simulacrum dying, and also creates 8 treasures before transforming the land into Ormondol, Profane Prince.
Isn't it glorious?
Solemn Simulacrum then returns to play thanks to its coin counter, and Alex puts a Plains into play tapped from his library. Not yet finished, Alex casts Fumigate, and Terrence responds by exiling Teysa Karlov with Swords to Plowshares. Alex gains 2 life, Teysa is returned to play thanks to her coin counter, and the board is then wiped with only Orthandol and Athreos left standing. Alex gains 24 life, and I drain Paddy, Alex and Terrence for 6 with Cruel Celebrant, and Alex then moves to combat. He attacks Terrence with his demon, dealing him 9 damage and gaining 9 life before moving to his second main phase. Here he casts Sayara, Thirst of Lockwayne, draining the table for 1 and moves to his end step. Alex puts a coin counter on his elf, and pleased with his turn, passes.
Terrence plays a Forest and recasts Katilda. Next he casts Saviour of Orlenbock and ends his turn.
I play Sunken Hollow and cast Merfolk Windrobber. I equip Sword of the Animist to the Merfolk and pass to Paddy.
In his turn, Paddy casts Casella, Blade of Gold Knight, and passes.
Alex plays Tainted Field and casts Grim Horospex. He drains the rest of us for 1 of Ayara's ability, then recasts Teysa, draining the table for 1 once again. Not liking the fact that I have a flying blocker, Alex targets him with Swords to Plowshares, and I respond by sacrificing the creature to their own ability. I draw a card in this way, Alex's spell fizzles without a target, and Alex moves to combat. Here he attacks me with Ormondal and his now a creature Athreos, and I respond by casting Victim of Night. I destroy Teysa with the kill spell, lowering Athreos' loyalty by 2 and turning them back into a regular old enchantment. Next I flash in Notion Thief, drawing the card that Alex should have drawn from his Horospex when Teysa died, and unable to block the Flying Demon, take 18 damage. Alex gains 18 life, thanks Casella for her contribution to combat, and ends his turn.
Terence begins his turn by playing Temple of Plenty, scrolling the top card of his library to the bottom. He then casts Vanquish's Banner, choosing Human, and passes to Martin.
I play a Swamp and equip Notion Thief with Sword of the Animist. Unable to do anything to impact the board at this moment in time, I pass the turn.
Paddy starts his turn by casting Mob Rule, choosing to gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater. This grants him temporary use of my Demon and Martin's Thief, and Paddy then moves to combat. Here he attacks me with Ormondal and Martin with Notion Thief, and Martin forgets to find a land with his sword's trigger.
Oops.
Before damage, Martin responds by flashing in Thieves Guild Enforcer. Terence, Paddy and I each mill 2 cards when the rogue enters the battlefield, and Paddy uses Sun Home Forge of the Legion to give Ormondal double strike.
Did somebody say quadruple damage?
Not wanting to take 36 damage, I respond to Sun Home's activation by casting Ink Shield, preventing all damage to me this turn, and creating 36 2/1 Inkling tokens with flying. This triggers Ayara's ability 36 times, draining each of my opponents for more than lethal damage, and winning me the game.
Well, that is it for another game. I hope that you enjoyed seeing Alex win by turning Paddy's combat step against him. I'd like to take this chance to thank our amazing patrons for all of their support, without whom we couldn't make videos such as these. Also, be sure to check out our affiliate links in the video description. Purchasing your items from these links won't cost you anything extra, but it really helps out the channel. And finally, remember that you can help to support us in 4 quick and easy ways: liking this video, subscribing, hitting the bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. That's it for now though guys, we'll see you next time. Stay awesome!